one individual story ends here, although other stories have yet to be started or concluded. Well, let's get on with it, shall we? So far, we've been following Jan's story, a messenger of the Index, one of the fingers who have been fighting over the nest of District 12, along with the FUM, the Liu Association, and Arcor. He observed the Kurokumo clan's transaction of Nouveau Fabric. He delivered prescripts, both real and false. Although it was revealed that the prescript saw this coming, and then made them legitimate. Then he was given a prescript to go somewhere else, and in this we shall see where he's going. Jan followed the instruction to enter L5123's fourth door, 14 steps to the right, 23 steps to the left. Use the staircase and go down it. And as he went down the staircase, he heard a sound and saw a dim light. He headed inside as he questioned if it was okay to do so. But the prescript that the instructions were written on demanded it. So his hands were tied. He then found himself before a complicated yet simple-looking set of machines. Yeah, an interesting setup. Deceptively primitive compared to the city above him. Jan was asking what the huge machinations were supposed to be. Then a woman greeted him, understanding his exhausting journey. She was quite hospitable to him. He asked who this woman was. She was apparently the weaver working there. She didn't get many visitors. She was also quite friendly towards her guest. Jan was clearly unaware that weavers even existed. This weaver understood that he was invited by the prescript. Jan questioned how she could possibly know that. The weaver told him that he wouldn't be able to get there if he didn't receive the prescript's guidance. The prescripts rarely invite people down there, so he should consider himself honoured. Jan asked if that place has something to do with the prescripts. The weaver confirmed this to be the case. It's actually the birthplace of the prescripts. This surprised Jan. The weaver saw that he had much that he wanted to hear. She was willing to do so, as she was bored, and then offered him a chair, as this story would take longer to recall than the Great Wall of China. Unfortunately, there was no tea, as warm water was hard to come by down there. Oh, seriously. Have you not heard of a kettle? Anyway. She then asked him who he was and what he was, while telling him that her name was Moire. Moire? Oh, well, however you pronounce that, that's what she's called. He identified himself as Jan Vismok, a messenger that started working for the Index less than a month before, delivering prescripts full of absurd and brutal orders. Clearly not that absurd and brutal. Otherwise, there'd be one delivered to the operator of a fixer office telling them to show compassion to all that you encounter and be a pacifist for a single day. They'd be lucky to be alive, even if their role wasn't primarily combat. Anyway, Moray understood the cruelty of the prescripts. They aren't always clear, which is why people got killed because of them, and not always due to the proxies. Jan was a one-man complaints department, as he had to deal with the aftermath of those prescripts. Well, more specifically those that survived their prescripts. He asked if she was the one who wrote them. She was light-hearted about that, despite his scary scowl that would make criminal thugs in the DC universe wet their pants. But she didn't write them. She simply managed the spinning wheels and loom. Then Jan asked how the prescripts were born. Moray shushed him as she turned his attention to the sound, a tremor climbing up his feet and touching his bosom, asking him if he felt that. He did, and he asked what the significance, or rather the significance of this was. Moray answered him by saying that it was the heartbeat of the city. Random frequencies vibrate, they move the pendulum, and the wheels spin to make friends. She then directed him to see it in action, to witness a new prescript being born. The pendulum acted like early earthquake early warning system. It swung above the threads, inscribing meaning on them, which looked like random scribbles to Jan. Moray sees it as the language of the city, something that Jan hasn't seen before. A language that is different to what people use. A language that Moray... Yeah, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation for her name. Sorry about that. Doesn't understand either. That's what the 57 spinning wheels are there for. The threads spun from the wheels are put in the loom, which are used to weave cloth. And this cloth is made into a prescript, much to Jan's disbelief. It was written in a language that he could understand, likely Korean. It said, to Che Hyun, when you see a person on a freeway intersection waving their hand 7 times, follow them to their house. Moray then prepared the prescript to be sent to a messenger for delivery. It was stamped and sent to a specific pipe to that messenger, in this case, pipe N9201. The prescript was rolled up and put inside, and then it went all the way to the surface. You know, it reminds me of how a society of assassins operated in the movie Wanted, where it involved the Loom of Fate, which gave out names through errors in fabric after they were decoded, which were apparently the names of agents of chaos and evil that needed to be killed to maintain balance. The Index and those under their protection that were given the prescripts are those that use a similar method. Anyway, back to the story. Jan was struggling to believe that this was what prescripts were. He asked who made the spinning wheels, the loom, and the pipes. Not to mention the pendulum. Moray didn't know, as she was led there by prescripts, and she was the successor of the previous weaver. Yeah. Who left after receiving a prescript one day. So whoever set that up, they likely took the secret of that to the grave with them. He then asked Moirai if she's ever questioned the prescripts, the frustration building in his voice. She didn't, and she had little else to do. He asked her if she had any idea how many have died because of those randomly generated commands, asking why she's never tweaked them to make them less cruel, if she's part of the prescript making process, and as a result, part of this problem. Moirai simply stated that she's doing this because a prescript ordered her to create and send them from down there to the surface. Breaking that would get her killed. Jan didn't understand, as she was the one sending them out. Moirai asked if he considered the possibility of another weaver in another nest, asking him if he thinks that she's the only one mailing the prescripts for the city. Like some postal service. Yeah, there's probably a weaver under each nest. It's unlikely to have a single weaver delivering different prescripts to the entire city, as if that weaver died suddenly, that's it. The index is finished. Jan asked who could be making the contents of the prescripts. Moirai believed it to be the city itself. The pendulum was moved by the city's motions. Every footstep, every tool used in a construction site, every person falling on the floor, every scream, every taken. That's right, every event in the city is a vibration that moves the pendulum. Even them talking. The people and the city are intertwined. They can never be free of it. Jan was struggling to believe that all the cruel things that the prescripts told people to do were out of the city's volition. He asked why the city had to be that way. Moirai explained that it was because the people are. The city reflected the cruel nature of the people that built it. A cruel nature imposed on it by the head and its multi-layered control over it. She saw them as born that way. Jan saw this mess for what it was, a mess. People built the city, and the city was controlling the people? Asking Moirai in disbelief. Well, she didn't see it as mattering that much. All that mattered was Whatever they did, they were a part of the city. Yan hadn't comprehended this, as all she did was weave cloth in a peaceful bunker with no idea of what effect that cloth has, all the pain, suffering, and death it brought. Why was it that she was so carefree about it? Well, she agreed with that, as she does what she's ordered to do, asking why she had to care. She saw it as volition, as the city's will matches the will of the people living in it. Are you sure it's not the machine that was made to encourage such behaviours? Because if so, they need little encouragement to do so. The head does so with their crazy-sounding laws, such as laws that make firearms not that effective to make combat as messy and as painful as possible. And that's just one example. According to her, there are beings born out of the city folks' wants, where humans want to walk the path given to them. They fear taking responsibility for their own actions, knowing that they have consequences, believing that they'd only end up the wrong way if they try to make their own decisions, preferring to rely on something and then expect things from it, rather than struggle with life. She saw that people have a desire and yearning for something to give them a way that leads to a purpose, whether that be wishing for quality within a society, that sought moral and cultural bankruptcy, or hope for the city to thrive, providing for all of its inhabitants. Gods are born from what the people needed from them. They didn't come on the orders of others, or made up, or oppressed. None could be blamed for this. So, quite a few wanted them. They created the fear. They brought the temptation of happiness. They brought the promises and wishes of all people. What a big load of... That sounds like those that blindly follow religious doctrine to either distance themselves from or not feel any guilt towards any actions that are questionable at best and immoral at worst. You know what? That. It doesn't even need to be blind faith in organized religion. It could be something secular, like the concept of the greater good, where the equivalent of a heretic is one that questions the concepts, or more specifically questions the morality of the concepts, because according to the greater good, whatever is told to be the greater good is unquestionably good. And any who believe otherwise should be ashamed of themselves, at least to those that practice that concept. Makes you ashamed to be human, doesn't it? I certainly would be. Sorry, I'm getting depressing, aren't I? Let's continue with the story. Anyway, she asked him if he got why the prescripts came into existence. Now this started to make Yan break down. That it wasn't his fault, that people weren't doing the cruel things on the prescripts. Blindly. Well, not as blindly as he thought. Apparently, they'd do something like that anyway. He sees Moira as rights. He saw that now, seeing that the people of the city as always cruel, seeing humans as born that way, having desperate wishes, whether it be pure wishes from innocent fears, or ambitions born from greed. The prescripts gave the people what they wanted. All those people he killed, or all the things he took from others. Yeah, petty criminal acts. He felt guilt at their screams, trying not to be fazed. He now saw this as having useless feelings that were eating away at his heart, seeing him as a tiny part of that world that could never change the wishes of everyone. He couldn't deny this. What he did was part of the city. The will of the city. In case it isn't obvious, this revelation broken Jan and turned, it broke Jan and turned him into a straw nihilist, as nothing mattered to him now. He saw him forging prescripts out of spite and delivering them as pointless, as this was traced to the city's volition, not his free will. Yet he saw it as his volition in the end. The city, himself, and everyone else. Was there a difference? Not to Jan, apparently. Asking Moira if she thought so too. And then he changed. He became a distortion that was a mechanical typewriter monster dripping with ink, with giant fists on chains that used to be his arms. So, he's basically a more horrific reject character from the Nintendo game Arms. He lost his own will, asking Moira where he should go next. The city must know. This caught her off guard. She looked for something, and then handed him an invitation to the library. He saw it as what the city willed, signing his name, and then he left for the library, leaving Moira alone. Once more, asking who he was talking to, then got back to her position. Jan Vismok gave up on himself, not resisting the despair that led to his distortion and the loss of his will. If he decided to slaughter Moira and trash the setup making prescripts, he'd likely be wielding an EGO and truly defy the prescripts in this feedback loop of suffering. But then again, if the prescript saw this possibility coming, Jan would never even get close to the loom to be able to cause such damage. As for the loom, along with the spinning wheels and the pendulum, I have some theories on its origins. I suspect that this elaborate and deceptively primitive setup was made by the head as part of another layer of their control. Think about it. The fingers have equal powers to wings, where neither is willing to risk taking on the other. In a sort of cold civil war. Now, how would you keep organized crime in check? A solution would appear to be create a syndicate based around following seemingly random instructions. Instructions based around cruelty, pain, and death. It certainly fits their way of doing things, as their laws at times were made to encourage cruelty, pain, and death. They also create monstrosities out of children. Yes, children! Turning them into short-lived liquid creatures that need to feed on those caught outside during the night in the back streets as a form of both keeping the peasants in line and also as a form of population control. The rest of the wings seem to need little encouragement to be cruel and callous to others. As for when this was set up, it was likely quite far back. The pipes looked like they were there for some time, as was this setup. It was under the very foundations of the city, where not even Moire knows of its origins, much like the head in general. In fact, those that try to look into their origins, or something about the head that they shouldn't, they likely end up dead. The head prefers everyone to know just enough to know not to provoke them. It was likely set up before or after the Mechanical Rebellion. There's no way of knowing which is the case, as there's some gaps in the history that still remain. It's possible that this was set up as part of what the head would create during the period that they were taking control after the Mechanical Rebellion, as easily as it could be a setup that was created before it in preparation. Then again, it could be something entirely separate from the head that they didn't see as necessary to intervene with. Well, if it was helping any threats to their rule destroy itself, why stop them? That would be what the head would have as its viewpoint, if that was the case. Roland was surprised at what the prescripts were. As for Angela, she hadn't heard of beings akin to gods of the city, either seeing or reading about the city. Roland believed that there were some that fit this description. In fact, he thought that he's seen something similar a few times, although it's unconfirmed and he didn't know a lot, to be honest, about them. Angela reasoned that according to this logic, the prescripts are one of them, created by the collective desire of those living aimless lives looking for a purpose. She asked if he's seen one of these, beings akin to gods. Roland didn't know, and he wasn't even sure that he saw it at all. The details were blurry. It appears that it was something that affected his memory of this. So, like a being that sought to strip people of memories that are holding them back, well, that appears to be the case, considering the effects. Either that or this being didn't want anyone to remember it. He asked if she didn't think much of them. And she didn't, based on what one of them has done so far. One of them made out of people's wishes. Wishes leading only to ruin, questioning if it was truly for their sake, and asked Roland if these gods are leading the residents of the city to the correct paths. Roland saw it as something that appeared to be a weird cult, where the worshippers were giving their lives to an object that swings on a whim, which implies that it can be as dangerous to the wielder as it can be to what it's aimed at, through arbitrary meanings given to it, like it's the heartbeat of the city. A consequentialist view shared by many religions, except with methods that are a complete mess. Yet they gave the people direction, although it might not be a direction that they might want to go down if they knew where it would lead. A life richer and more human? Roland, that's debatable, as they're given suffering and death, fear and despair. They believe that a goal that's forcibly handed to them is better than nothing. Have you not been paying attention to a single thing that you've just seen? Although they both agree that the perspective varies from person to person. Angela then focused their attention on the distorted version of Jan, counting on Roland and the others to deal with him. Upon arrival, distorted Jan chanted, "Receive a prescript and carry it out," like it's a mantra. Then Angela appeared to greet him. But Jan says that he knows that she's Angela. Angela acknowledged that he knows her well. Jan said that the prescripts know everything. They represent the will of the city. They know everything that goes on in the city. They know what he's going to do, what she's going to do, all of it. Angela asked if he had any doubts in the prescripts. He has none. The prescripts are the city's will. The city's volition is his will. To deny this is to deny himself. Angela understood this as accepting it as truth, that he has no will of his own, asking if he saw that as unfair. Jan didn't see that they have to be driven to despair due to the repercussions of their choices, worn down by pain, standing in the field of thorns on their own 2 feet. Oh, so he's met Snow White's apple at some point. By filling up the past that can't be filled alone. Wait, by insane, cruel, and sometimes violent instructions? Their lives can become more lavish? Jan, clearly your definition of lavish is having as much pain, misery, and suffering as possible, while also inflicting it on others. Yeah, that's right. Share the pain. He sees himself as having the talent to walk the path in front of him, not to make him happy, but to know where to go, and that's enough for him. Angela accepts that he's satisfied with that, and then ushered him in. Now, this one was a powerful distortion. Clearly he believed what he said quite honestly, as he was quite the handful to the librarians sent to take him down. He could erode them, along with deliver a giant sword from the sky, and even use his chain fist to try and destroy them. In fact, it's disabling these chain fists that was required to even cause damage to him. But the librarians were eventually able to take him down and make a book out of him. Such a tragic story. The story of Jan Vismok. He sought to live his own life, but the index chained him to a life of servitude to the prescripts from the moment he received his first one, to his life as a messenger, to his final transformation into a distortion. After this battle, Angela asked if his death was what the prescripts intended. Roland said that they might as well be, as they appear to see several steps ahead. He questioned what Jan endured and struggled so much for, risking death, forging prescripts to express his free will. But as Angela put it, the prescript saw it coming. His death was what the prescripts led him to. Angela noted that he said that there were good things to be said about the prescripts. He confirmed this as they're still a part of the city. Angela wasn't convinced, although she did understand the reasoning. Life as a human, never wanting for anything. Well, she asked what reason these gods of the city emerged. Why did people wish for them to exist, even though they bring negative outcomes? She considered it, from most people's perspectives, those without a purpose to live. How would she act? Roland asked what her conclusion would be. Her answer to that would be basically saying, go yourself. I'm not going to sit and wait for orders like a domestic dog happily obeying it for praise. I'm going my own way. Yeah, clearly that Fleetwood Mac song is quite fitting for this situation, although she understood that she wouldn't know unless she was in that situation. Roland understood that it's not as simple as calling it good or bad. Angela understood this as well. She still didn't understand the prescripts and those that followed it. She was curious about what Roland just mentioned. She didn't know what Jan's actions and the consequences to them were trying to show. Roland didn't understand either. He didn't even know if there was a purpose to this in the first place, not understanding the prescripts. He saw how simple the process of the distortion was, a breakdown of a belief firmly held, which can serve as a catalyst, which, according to Roland, was common in the city, although he knew why people weren't distorting more often. It still left a bitter taste in his mouth regardless. Oh yes, and the city itself could be compared to real-life Dubai. Largely shiny, nice-looking, and with tall buildings that were more money than sense. Yeah, there was plenty of wealth in places, but with even more disparity in society, such as many only just surviving at best, and are almost slaves at worst, working ridiculous amounts of hours, along with insane practices occurring. Although the main difference between the city and Dubai is that the city is much worse, as at least the area outside of Dubai isn't filled with failed genetic experiments and rogue AI. as a book, he revealed some things. And that involved him seeing phosphane sensation. A glimmer of light when he closed his eyes. But when he closed his eyes, he saw a blurry image of a blood-stained carpet, which was the beginning of an unpleasant nightmare involving 4 mannequins missing a face and an arm on the carpet, spilling red beads. Another mannequin had its hand on his shoulder and a loudspeaker in its face, delivering something that he can't make out. But the vibration he felt matched the words. He was unable to remember his good childhood memories because of that. He took the flower and nailed it into the mannequin's heart, which resulted in a tree growing from the cracks made by the flower. A tree that was soft and pretty, although also sharp, as he was scolded for the first time. The branches making a piercing buzz, the petals hurting him as they brushed against his cheeks. The pain he felt, it made him stand still, his body covered in scars. 2 black marbles fell from the wounds. The nightmares were there for most of his life, likely involving the prescripts, as the memory haunted him. Either that or it's a memory of something terrible that he did in the past. Yet the past was preferable to a worse present. The prescripts kept coming. A variety of different ends which were consistently cruel. He felt a resentment. The resentment of others, along with their screams, their tears, their rage, and even seeing them die. He questioned if things would have been better if he was taking the prescripts instead of receiving them. At least he'd be killed and it'd have gotten it over with. The nightmares were likely a repressed memory of him killing his family, if not a group of people, because the prescripts told him to. Eventually, he received a prescript that told him to become a messenger. And that was truly the beginning of his own personal hell. The prescripts did not want him to die. He was frustrated by the lack of control over his life. He tried to make a tiny crack in the prescripts to show that it was possible to oppose them, to make a difference. It gave him hope, although it would have been a better expression of free will to ignore the prescript telling him to be a messenger and take his own life. He questioned how to live his life, a life that he could live with. In the end, the prescripts couldn't be escaped. They were the city's will, his limit reached. A wall that he couldn't overcome. He hoped that there would be someone who could ride the flow rather than break it, to accomplish what he could not, to find an answer in his stead. How could he enjoy that nightmare? How can anyone enjoy that nightmare? Yeah. Not very encouraging, is it? Upon being declared imperatus civitalis, Angela was in an unusually ecstatic mood, as her memories were fading. Roland asked if she meant the memories of her 1,000,000 years of hell in the Botany Corporation. She confirmed this. They were becoming faint and melting away like carvings of the entire Kim dynasty made out of butter in close proximity to a blowtorch. She remembered up to 4 days ago at most, not 1,000,000 years ago. 4 days ago, where she was able to live according to her own choice. Yeah, choosing to live almost exactly as she did previously. Don't know if that's an improvement. Also, time isn't moving at 1% normal speed. It's moving at, well, certainly closer to 100% normal speed. She felt happier with each new day. This was noticeable to Roland. He asked her what she thought of the city and its people. She noticed that it was breaking down because of the distortion. Even knowing that, she can't quite receive that news with a smile. She then spoke of Aen, that despicable man who locked her up for 1,000,000 years. That he would fall to despair if he saw what was happening now, deriving sadistic pleasure from his idiotic and flawed plan causing more people to suffer, that he was going to pay the price in full soon enough. Angela, aren't you ignoring the fact that the plan was sound and it was causing people suffering because you cut it off? So if he's despicable, what would that make you? As you're doing things as if he was still in charge. This made Roland ask about her vengeance that she's trying to get. Is she going to bring the whole city down at the end of it? She then told him that she wanted freedom, along with the freedom of the librarians, and more disturbingly, that also applies to the abnormalities inside the library. They would be granted physical form and be able to leave. She's willing to let them gain strength by devouring those powerful enough to give them said strength. They'd be free to roam the city as they'd like. Angela, do you know how barking that sounds? The magical girls are anime come to life. They'd be a danger to one district. Then there's the twisted Wizard of Oz sets. Nothing there could cause chaos solo. And that's not considering the Apocalypse Bird. Not to mention something that's slightly worse than that. So her plan is to watch the city burn. Or more specifically, bring chaos to the city via the abnormalities, leaving a mark deeper than any distortion could on the city. This is what the one book would guide her towards, to teach her how to do this. This disturbed Roland, comparing her to the blue sicko. They'd work well together. Although she corrected him by saying that the main difference between them was that it's not beauty that she's interested in. She simply wanted the abnormalities to live as they wished. She'd be damned if she gave the light away to him. Roland understood one thing loud and clear, that she wanted to receive the joy of vengeance, regardless of the consequences. That's the problem, isn't it? That she seems to have the typical city folk attitude towards collateral damage, as in quite liberal. Angela saw this as what she must do, as she was forced to witness countless deaths while following that script, which was how she learned how to do that without the script. What she does well. The only thing that she knows how to do. Yeah, it's clear that she has a love-hate relationship with her father. So she had to feel joy at the fall of his plan, even though she doesn't enjoy seeing the city and its people suffer because of her. She still feels that she had to feel happy, as this was what she was waiting for. Until that point, she saw no other way for her to be repaid for the million years of suffering. She longed for vengeance. She then decided not to think about it any longer. She'd find the one book that would make her wish come true. Roland questioned if there was going to be a next time. He thought it'd be nice to have someone else think about it, rather than dealing with it alone. Angela thought that it wasn't a bad idea, and she wanted to travel the world. It would be fun, once she's dealt with everything there. Roland advised to give that some good thought after all loose ends are tied. And Angela hinted at other settlements beyond the city. But would she stop with leaving one city in chaos, or would she continue with another? Will she truly let the librarians live a second longer than they're useful? It's clear that Roland was concerned about this. There was also something that Angela didn't consider. Will the head, or indeed any others that are aware of her, just let them do this? Her and the librarians, I mean. Well, I'm sure that will be revealed in the last law section, which will hopefully be shorter than this one. What comes next will be worse than any of the stars of the city that was covered in this lore section. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!